On this Thursday night, the timeline of a murderous mission. RCMP detailed the rapid, chaotic events of the rampage on the James Smith Cree Nation.
An incredibly complex and large-scale investigation.
How it unfolded, what's still a mystery, and the reaction. The troubling history of the man accused in the Pentagon leak and new questions about how he ever got hired. Feeling like you work 8 days a week.
I don't take days off.
Why those running small businesses feel they can't catch a break. And a one-time king of daytime TV dies.
They're gonna wrestle in applesauce.
Jerry Springer's undeniable influence on popular culture.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin in Saskatchewan and the most detailed timeline yet of one of the worst mass killings in Canadian history. The RCMP, who have spent 7 months investigating the multiple murders in a stabbing rampage, gave a 4-hour presentation today revealing new details about the chaotic, brutal events. 11 people were killed during the attack on the James Smith Cree Nation and in nearby Weldon, Saskatchewan. 17 others were injured. It happened last September and ended after a 4-day manhunt. The RCMP release today is distressing and detailed, revealing how 32-year-old Myles Sanderson carried out his murderous mission.
RCMP investigators and specialists documented, examined, and processed 42 different crime scenes, buildings, vehicles. Over 1,250 investigative tasks have been assigned, and new tasks continue to be identified.
The scope of today's presentation delivered some answers to family and friends who lost loved ones last fall, but to many, questions remain about the police response and Sanderson's motive. Melissa Ridgen has our top story tonight.
It has been and continues to be an incredibly complex and large-scale investigation of which the details are unimaginable.
The RCMP's timeline begins on September 1st, 3 days before the killing spree. What we know now, Myles and Damian Sanderson were on a days-long booze and cocaine-fueled bender and escalating as they committed break-ins, assaults, and car thefts at James Smith Cree Nation. And the pair disclosed to some that they had, quote, a mission that people would remember, something police did not know until it was too late. According to police, Damian was actually the first homicide victim in the early morning hours of September 4th when an argument inside a stolen van turned deadly. Damian escaped the van and died of his injuries. His body was found in a bushed area on September 5th. Myles alone went on a reign of terror through James Smith Cree Nation, driving from house to house, breaking in, armed with a knife, to attack those he found inside.
His attacks were unpredictable. As fast as information was coming in about a vehicle he was in, he was abandoning that vehicle, moving on foot, and then stealing other vehicles.
After his brother, Myles' first victim was Robert Sanderson, attacked just after 6 a.m. He then appeared at the house of Christian and Lana Head, killing the pair before taking off in their truck. A series of assaults unfolded before Myles entered a home where Gregory Burns was attacked. The 28-year-old was said to have run outside, where he later died. Myles Sanderson's next victim was Earl Burns, an Indigenous veteran who had attempted to chase Myles down in a school bus that he drove in the community. The killing spree continued at another home where he attacked Thomas and Carol Burns, followed by another series of assaults before his last victims on James Smith Cree Nation, Lydia and Bonnie Burns. Myles Sanderson then made his way to nearby Weldon, where he killed 78-year-old Wesley Peterson. From the first stabbing to the last, 2 hours elapsed while police scrambled in his wake, calling in additional resources from across the region and province.
This investigation equates to 11 separate homicide investigations and 17 separate attempted murder investigations.
Melissa, this is so much information for family and friends of the victims to take in. The RCMP did brief them ahead of this press conference today. What do they make of it all?
Donna, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and the big question is why, which we may never know, as the two men with that answer are both dead. Daryl Burns is the brother of one of the victims, Lydia Burns, a community crisis worker who was killed when she went to help an earlier victim. He had this to say about the police response.
Hearing this and watching it up on a screen and realizing that how much chaos and confusion and terror that was happening that morning, like Like, how could anyone know? How could anyone know where he was and where he was going to go and what he was going to do?
That grieving brother says that everyone involved, his sister and the killer, is a victim of drugs. And another death in this, the community's crisis response team. He says that it's unclear what the future holds for that. It was set up to help with suicides, not mass murders. Next will be 2 inquiries to fill in more blanks and possible improvements that could be made going forward. Donna.
All right, Melissa Ridgen in Melfort, Saskatchewan tonight. Thanks. Nearly 2 weeks after intense fighting broke out in Sudan, Canada has finally started airlifting people out. 2 Canadian military flights left Sudan today. The government says the first carried 45 people, the second 73 people, though it's not clear how many of those on board were Canadians.
All options are on the table. Planning is occurring as we speak to ensure the maximum number of Canadians can be evacuated as soon as possible.
There is no word on when the next flights might leave. The situation on the ground is getting worse. Power outages are leading to shortages of water and food. A fragile ceasefire has been extended another 72 hours. The country's rival military forces apparently agreeing to the truce. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in New York City today at the Global Citizen Conference, along with politicians, philanthropists, and celebrities. It's focused on global issues such as climate change, food insecurity, and international human rights. Critics are quick to point out the contradiction between attending an event like this when, at the same time, the Liberal government is cutting foreign aid funding by $1 billion this year. Neetu Garcha reports from New York.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in New York City at an event global citizen organizers say aims to end extreme poverty. He started with a meeting at the United Nations with Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley.
We're halfway to the deadline for the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have a lot of work to do still.
But back home, some in the Canadian international aid sector say they're surprised to see Trudeau at a high-profile conference on international human rights when the Liberals are set to scale back aid funding to some of the world's poorest countries by $1.3 billion.
Cut foreign aid by 15% for 1 year. There's consequences with your partners in the global south. There's consequences right here at home with Canadian aid sector who are pretty unhappy.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also criticizing the trip in question period Wednesday, singing Frank Sinatra's New York, New York, while slamming Trudeau for not staying home during the federal public service strike.
He wants to be a part of it. New York, New York.
But Canada's ambassador to the U.S. says the trip is important for doubling down on U.S. investments in Canada.
Penetrating into the U.S. Media world, penetrating into the U.S. business community is much better done in person.
As International Development Minister Harjit Sajjan defends the Liberals' aid funding cut, he announced $195 million to expand the program supporting women's rights organizations around the world.
The mainline budget allows us to keep programs going. So, for example, no programs have been cut.
We spent extra significant amounts because of the pandemic, because of the war in Ukraine, because of what's happening in Afghanistan, what's happening elsewhere. So we spiked up tremendously, but the baseline continues to go.
Trudeau has been promoted by Global Citizen as one of the prominent figures at this event. He's set to make a keynote address on Friday, and he's expected to meet with the Council on Foreign Relations to speak about the importance of the critical mineral supply chain, the country's economic outlook, and Canada-U.S. relations on the heels of President Biden's visit to Ottawa last month. Donna?
All right, Neetu Garcha in New York City tonight. Thanks. In Taiwan, polls suggest the desire for unification with China has never been more unpopular. But for people in at least one area of the self-governed democracy, opinions are more divided. Kinmen Island sits just a few kilometers from mainland China and is governed by Taiwan. About 70,000 people live there. If the Chinese military were to invade Taiwan, those people could be on the front lines. Our Jeff Semple went to find out what it's like living at the center of that decades-long tension.
Blacksmith Wu Sangdong runs this workshop on Taiwan's Kinmen Island. He prides himself on making something good out of something terrible. Wu forges household knives made with steel from old Chinese bombs, artillery shells that landed here decades ago. And on this island, he's not running short of material. I was only a few months old when the artillery battle started, but the fighting continued for many years, he says. Kinmen Island is caught in the middle of a frozen conflict. This Taiwanese territory is far from Taipei, but just a couple of kilometers from mainland China. And 74 years ago, Kinmen became a front line.
This island is littered with remnants of war, a civil war that in 1949 saw Kinmen Island torn apart from the mainland. The communists took control of mainland China and the nationalists fled, taking control of Taiwan and Kinmen Island, among others.
Over 20 years, the Chinese fired on the island hundreds of thousands of times, supplying shells for Wu's workshop. He says the shelling happened every other night. His family and others huddled in shelters and bunkers, waiting for the bombing to stop. Now he fears history is poised to repeat. The Chinese government has vowed to take Taiwan by force if necessary, its military running drills rehearsing an invasion. The vast majority of Taiwanese oppose joining China, but in Kinmen Island, feelings are mixed. If the communists are coming, let them come, says this 66-year-old. His father fought the Chinese military, and he grew up under the bombing. But still, Chinese and Taiwanese people are the same, he says. Same ancestors and language. Chinese people will no longer fight their own people. That affinity is also explained by necessity. Beijing recently started supplying drinking water to stabilize the island's supply, and a ferry service now shuttles passengers back and forth to China. A significant portion of Kinmen's economy relies on tourism and small-scale trade with China, says this local representative of Taiwan's ruling party. But closer ties with communist China doesn't mean they're willing to give up their democratic freedoms. Every day, this speaker tower broadcasts music and a message to China by the late Taiwanese singer and pro-democracy activist Teresa Tang. It is my fervent hope that our fellow citizens on mainland China can enjoy the same democracy and freedom that we have here, it says.
We enjoy our system, our political system here.
This Kinmen congresswoman explains the main difference between Taiwanese mainlanders and islanders.
The island, I think, more than Taiwan, did experience real war.
And people here remember what it cost. It is crucial that we strive to prevent any war, Wu says. It would bring great suffering to both sides. Jeff Semple, Global News, Kinmen Island.
The 21-year-old U.S. National Guard airman accused of posting classified documents online has a history of making threats and researched mass shootings. That's according to U.S. Justice Department lawyers. Jack Teixeira was in court today. Federal prosecutors want him kept in custody, saying the military IT specialist is both a national security threat and a serious flight risk. Court documents filed Wednesday by federal prosecutors say Teixeira accessed hundreds of classified documents for over a year, far exceeding what has been publicly disclosed. They allege he has a troubling history of behavior, including making racist and violent threats in high school, researching mass shootings on government computers, and amassing an arsenal of weapons, including a bazooka, in his bedroom. It's alleged he wrote on social media that he wanted to kill a ton of people as a way of culling the weak-minded, and that he appears to have taken a series of obstructive steps intended to thwart the government's ability to ascertain the full scope of what he has obtained. Well, some people are working for the weekend, but for small business owners, that break never comes. We'll tell you why coming up. If you're a small business owner, you know how hard it is to take time off. Canada's labor shortage is having an impact across all businesses, but it's felt most acutely by small businesses. New data from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business shows owners are taking on more hours and more responsibilities. And as Anne Gaviola explains, that is taking a toll.
I don't take days off. I just take little pieces of time during each day to try and fit in my personal life, basically.
Most every waking moment of Jen Newark's life is spent working or thinking about her boutique grocery store for pets. Her story is typical of entrepreneurs running small businesses, with those in hospitality and agriculture most likely to work overtime. The average small business owner dealing with a worker shortage puts in nearly 60 hours a week, according to polling by the CFIB. That's the equivalent of 7.5 8-hour shifts in a single week. Hiring at pet grocer has become particularly challenging given the tight labor market.
The last time we did a job ad, we had very few applicants, and of those applicants, none of them met the criteria of what we had just listed in the ad.
The CFIB says the shortage holds back a company's ability to grow and innovate.
Impacts of labor shortages is they have to turn down sales or contracts, and also they decrease their service offerings.
It can also lead to burnout, blurring the lines between work and personal life.
It can be overwhelming, and I know that sometimes my family and friends, as understanding as they are, get a little bit frustrated.
Small businesses expect to increase wages by an average of 3.3% in the next year, according to the CFIB. Now, that is welcome news for prospective workers, though still well below the rate of inflation. Donna? All right, Angaviola in Toronto, thanks. Ahead, encouraging signs about access to palliative care in Canada. For vulnerable patients, especially those needing end-of-life care, being pain-free and comfortable and keeping their dignity is so important. A new study suggests the number of Canadians who need palliative care and get it has gone up over the past 2 years. Catherine Ward explains why it makes such a difference for families and what still needs to change.
This room, in my life, there was no negativity.
When Shannon Murray thinks about her mom, Bonnie, she doesn't focus on the stage 4 cancer that took her life at the age of 73. Instead, Murray thinks of her positive spirit.
She was just a light and love and full of inspiration and tenacity.
Wonder Woman Bonnie was told she only had 6 months to live. She fought for another 3 years. At the end, Murray says palliative care was a blessing for the whole family.
They know what to recognize, and they know how to offer the support. And in your time of need or in your loved one's time of need, that is invaluable.
The study shows 58% of Canadians who died between 2021 and 2022 received palliative care, an increase from 52% 5 years ago.
Analysts say this is in part because of a push to help Canadians age in place and get better access to end-of-life support, whether at home, hospice, or in the hospital. Still, experts say there is room for improvement.
Often what we can see is from time of admission, the majority of folks die within about 30 days of that admission. So that right away suggests to us that those folks were not identified early enough.
The numbers show cancer patients are more likely to receive care.
Typically, depending on the cancer, people follow a more linear trajectory in their diagnosis. It's a little bit easier to know when to initiate a palliative care approach and offer a palliative care approach. This is very different from other diagnoses like congestive heart failure, COPD, strokes, or dementia, which have sometimes very unpredictable ups and downs through the trajectory.
As Murray experienced, having full support can provide unexpected peace, even while preparing for the end.
No matter how many struggles we had in life, that as long as we had each other, we were always going to be okay.
Catherine Ward, Global News, Toronto.
Nothing was too much. Next, the life and legacy of talk show host Jerry Springer. There was no subtlety to Jerry Springer's talk show, from stripper wars to Honey, I'm a Call Girl, and even I Married a Horse. No topic was too much. Jerry Springer has died at the age of 79. He started off mild-mannered, but then he veered into showcasing dysfunctional and outrageous relationships. Even he admitted the show that ran for nearly 3 decades was stupid, but he called critics of it elitist, said it was always about real people. And millions of people tuned in to watch. Mike Armstrong on who Springer was and what he left behind.
There was a time when this wasn't normal. Whether it was brotherhood betrayal or a battling bride, daytime TV shows haven't always needed bouncers. Well, that was before the Jerry Springer Show.
I'd like to formally apologize. I've ruined the culture.
All right, now I can see what you're fighting over. Okay, what's going on here?
The show ran for 27 seasons and made Springer a household name. It was syndicated in other countries and other languages, and it was a platform to other opportunities. Springer played Captain Hook on the stage in London.
Well, I've never played a bad guy before because, you know, even on my show, I'm the good guy and everyone else is crazy. Here is your ex-boyfriend, Dennis.
Now, Springer never seemed to take himself or his show too seriously. TV Guide named it the worst show of all time, but Springer said it wasn't for the critics or even for himself.
I was hired to be a ringleader of a circus. I am hosting a show about outrageousness.
Springer was born in London to Jewish parents who escaped Germany during the Holocaust. He was raised in New York, went into law, then politics. In 1977, he was elected mayor of Cincinnati.
Thank you for letting the son of refugees of Nazi Germany make it in America. Thank you.
Iraqi air defense base.
Springer's next career was as a journalist, then came the jump to daytime TV in 1991 with a show that Springer would joke likely lasted too long.
We're starting to get the kids of our original guests on. And this is wrong because these people were told not to procreate.
Well, Springer's show also spawned imitators, other programs that he would say went too far.
Good.
That was a criticism also leveled at Springer, that he exploited his guests. But Springer insisted he was showing a part of American life and Americans that otherwise weren't seen on television. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Canadian Rockies near Camrose, Alberta. Thanks for watching. Farah Nasser will be here at the Anchor Desk tomorrow, and I'll see you on Saturday for the new reality. Bye-bye.